natives in Central South America have promoted the Mexican government to declare certain mine sites as unreachable officially. This is because in this region, drug cartels have become so powerful that they even defy the government. On the other hand, in Ecuador, two major drug cartels, Tenanza and Jalisco, are engaged in such intense fighting that analysts have declared the drug war a national crisis in Ecuador. Moreover, a small village in a remote area of Mexico has been attacked by a drug cartel. This might seem like simple news, but the type of attack the cartel carries indicates how terrifying it can be. They didn't just stage a regular attack, they used drones. Many have seen in Narcos the existence of vast sums of money, and they could easily challenge the government in war. But now, with drone-like advanced technology at their disposal, think about the implications, and even more significantly, why are these drug-related stories so prevalent in Latin America compared to anywhere else? And in Latin America, what exists that makes cocaine cultivation most prevalent there? And what colonial legacy is lurking behind this? Today's video is all about these topics. Okay, so what motivation is driving these drug cartels to become so terrifying? And if nothing else, what's the most significant motivating factor in the lives of 8 out of 10 ordinary people? That would be money. If you want to live life beautifully, you will need that thing. But what happens when earning money through these two paths leads to its ultimate consequence? That's something you might not know. When we talk about the most ancient and advanced civilizations on Earth, the names of these three civilizations will surely come up: the Mayans, the Incas, and the Aztecs. A significant thing to note is that the birth of these three civilizations came from one continent, America. Specifically speaking, it's Latin America. And the downfall of these three civilizations fell into the hands of just one civilization. And they are the Spanish conquistadors. Here's something to consider. Spanish-speaking Latin America historians never use the term Spanish colonizers. They use conquistadors. Now, what's behind this? Because compared to British or French powers, the atrocities committed by the Spanish were on other level during the colonial era. When using the word colonizer, it might somewhat diminish those atrocities. That's why the term conquistadors is used. And if you dig a little deeper, you will understand why Colombia is called the borderless bird of magical realism. Magical realism and surrealism have permeated Latin America's civilizations from the very beginning. The concept was that body and soul coexist, meaning if you don't take care of the soul, the body will suffer, and if you don't care for the body, the soul will suffer. The primary thing is that this region, filled with astrology, shamanic rituals, and obscure myths, used to engage in various kinds of plant use and animal food consumption, all for their psychoactive properties in their day-to-day activities. But when the Spanish arrived, they considered these practices utterly useless. This brief history of drug use, as Antonio Escojondo puts it in his book, tells us that the conquistadors used psychoactive drugs to declare themselves worshippers of demons or Shaitan. During the Middle Age of Europe, there was something called witch hunting, which at the time defined society. During this witch hunting era, their interrogation manuals like the Demon Menagerie by John Boarding in 1580 directly associated drug use to worshipping Shaitan. Because of this, when Spanish Christian conquistadors went to another continent and found a society filled with treasures but also drug use, They didn't hesitate to use their religious doctrines to satisfy their greed without thinking twice. Society repeatedly leveled these plans, rituals, and therapeutic activities, which have been part of their daily lives for thousands of years, as nothing but blasphemy when the Spanish arrived, and it was portrayed as if the use of these drugs corrupted the very sophisticated societies. Christopher Columbus and subsequent researchers found ample evidence in Mexico of the natural relationship between psychoactive drugs and the economy of this society. When the Spanish conquistadors involved the vice kingdom of New Spain, they referred to their cacti or any other plant that provided them with a different spiritual experience as something to be curbed and utilized for their benefit. This use of drugs by the Spanish has been present in Latin America for almost several thousand years. So if you understand this, you can grasp that these psychoactive drugs have been intertwined with the entire belief system of this region for centuries. However, when the Spanish arrived, they banned all those things that were part of the daily lives of the people in this region and labeled them as barbaric. However, at the same time, they incorporate their alcohol or liquor culture here. After the Spanish conquest, the region of South Central America became the largest sugarcane production region. And with sugarcane, what they did was that made sugar, alcohol, and wine. Even if there isn't any documented evidence, I can confidently say that the Spanish were banning these types of drugs here or giving them the savage tag. They are indulging in this initially. Then they say, no, you can't have it. Later, they have it again, whether it can be done. Famous medical practitioners like Castidorus and Burnham by Complia started promoting the adverse effects of cannabis from the 1910s to 1920s. And in their research, they specifically used measures of the black population to research their racist notions. And it's because of this that the Brazilian government and the First League of Nations were convinced to sign the anti-drug treaty. And from then on, there has been a war on drugs led by America, Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia for the next 4 years. But hastily, it can be seen that this task is not actually against drugs. So, there are allegations that various types of drugs are cultivated to displace the indigenous people, and their lands are being destroyed. With the government seizing those lands, the Nixon administration first added the war on drugs to their national security policy in 1969, and then they divided the whole world into two parts, one being the drug-producing countries and other being the drug-consuming countries, inevitably dumping the entire South America into drug production and leaving North America, meaning the USA, as the drug-consuming region. And by doing this, they created a big mess. If they shut down the cannabis supplies coming from Mexico, other players in South America quickly got into the market. Then Colombia, Peru, and Argentina stepped in. Cocaine wasn't that famous at that time. Everyone was more focused on marijuana, and precisely at that time our little friend Pablo Escobar from Colombia and his cartel started sending drugs little by little. And then for those of you who have watched the Narcos, you all know that the DEA and the Colombian military eventually ended Pablo Escobar region, but after him came the gentleman of Colombia and then Mexico again. That means it's evident and what that whenever one person goes down, another immediately takes their place in flooding their territory. That means the drug supply isn't being shut off. Now you might wonder why, despite America having such powerful surveillance technology, they still can't stop the drug supply from Mexico. Well, behind this, there's also a political and strategic game. John Ehrlichman, who was Nixon's domestic policy advisor, informed the journalist Dan Boehm that Nixon's war on drugs was primarily a pretext to target the anti-war leftist and black people. At that time, America was immersed in a big anti-Vietnam War sentiment, and those who stood against it were often viewed unfavorably by the public opinion. So they had to be associated with something that would alien from the public opinion, and what something turned out to be drugs. Thus, marijuana and cocaine were linked to the leftist and black communities. John R. Lackman also stated that the Nixon administration knew that they were targeting various black communities, arresting their leaders, even though they had no real connection to drugs. But still, they continued to do so, with even more significant effects. This war on drugs had a substantial impact on the internal politics of Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, and Venezuela. Due to America's regular interventions, the United States were created entirely under the control of the drug cartels because of how the Middle East responded to America's repeated interference. A similar case arose in the Arab Spring. Latin America experienced somewhat of the same case, but we see a reverse picture this time. European countries like the Netherlands have legalized cannabis use, while Portugal has decriminalized it. Canada has legalized it too, although their situation isn't perfect. And then Argentina's Supreme Court ruling states that marijuana is no longer unconstitutional. And then those in Mexico who have been the frontline battleground of this war on drugs since 2005 also allow drugs for personal use in limited amounts, but seeing all these, one might not think that countries legalizing drugs, or simply marijuana, have been very successful. Just look at Canada's case. At first, they legalized cannabis, and then they started experimenting with legalizing various hard drugs in their provinces. But here, their approach has backfired. Why? Portugal and the Netherlands, where rehabilitation centers were set up before decriminalization, did it differently. Canada hasn't, and even if they didn't do it sufficiently. The target of this decriminalization is not to treat drugs as a tobacco, because there is a natural attraction of humanity towards prohibited things, and it is to eliminate this attraction that many countries have legalized drugs. But if someone abuses these drugs and overdoses, then to assist them adequately, there must be sufficient backup, and this backup infrastructure, however, is created by countries like Portugal or the Netherlands, and this infrastructure has been $1 billion project, which Canada has already invested in. Now, no drugs are being abused on the streets, which is why I legalized them and brought peace to the world. But the situation is not like that. Now suppose you look from the beginning of this video. What I wanted to say is that in Latin America or South America's culture, there were always many natural drugs mixed in, which represented their society. But in today's world, when we see the types of drugs that exist, they are undoubtedly hardline drugs, but they are not used. When the Spanish conquistadors came and restored their culture, perhaps some of those substances resurfaced from some unknown place, and from there America or other big countries have used the name of this war on drugs to serve their various political interests, and ultimately they are seeing drugs being legalized again in many countries, which is also having a positive effect on them. But again, not developing proper infrastructure may lead to situations where countries like Canada, by legalizing drugs, are inadvertently contributing to deaths there. These things seem very interesting to me. The politics and colonization surrounding drugs have been fascinating from ancient times to now. So, with that, that's all for today's upload. Have a good day. Goodbye.